Hey guys, how you doing? Hi. Sorry for the distraction here, but it was getting cold. I am so enthralled by these critters. I think they're magnificent. My daughters like them because they're fluffy. Hold it just 1 minute. I just want to take a minute and tell you I have my new magazine that I've been working on, Grow Your Life Magazine. Check out northernhomesteading.com and look for Grow Your Life Magazine. So these are now I want to tell you a few things about the sheep in general. Sheep are actually incredibly easy keeping animals. There goes my chalk, in my opinion. The first point about sheep I want to talk about is their diet. So the sheep, because of their nature as a ruminant animal, they have a rumen, their diet is a high fiber diet. They're basically halfway between cows and goats in their diet. So because they're rumen, they have this ultra high breakdown, this ultra high fermentation breakdown of fiber in their gut. They can extract a lot of feed value and protein out of some pretty low grade feeds like grassy hay that's not really worth much around here. Sheep generally need somewhere between 7 and 12% protein, depending on the time of year, depending on whether or not they're growing for meat, or if they're pregnant or nursing, you might want to up that protein a little for that. But generally, somewhere between 7 to 10 is actually totally perfectly fine. 7 is considered the minimum percentage of protein appropriate for your average adult sheep. So to put that into perspective, a really cheap, low quality grass hay is usually about 8% protein. So sheep are easy to feed. I mean, shucks, you look at like the feed value in straw. You can get a straw that's got a 6% protein. That by itself is almost enough for sheep. Not really, but it's darn close. I'm just trying to prove the point that these critters are dietarily durable. They're hardy, they're tough, they're durable. They're not fussy animals about what they eat. They can eat low quality feed. Generally, they're fine with any type of grass or weeds and leaves, that kind of thing. Anything that a cow or a horse or a goat or a rabbit would eat, they'll be able to handle. They do have a preference for leafy greens. Something that's a little more like a woody browse or brushy, they'll go for it, but generally they prefer the leafy stuff first. They will end up eating more like the green twigs and the soft wood on bushes, but they're going to go for the leafy greens first. That's just their preference. Most animals, are that way. We feed ours right now basically all hay because it's the winter and I'm not growing any crops right now. How much do sheep eat? Roughly around 3 pounds or so of hay in a day. The range, depending on their age and size, is going to be between about 2 and 4 pounds of hay a day. So I just kind of figure 4 pounds of hay a day is about good for sheep. Yeah, that's about. I know some folks will figure that for your adult sheep, they're going to do about 1 square bale about once a week per sheep. And it's an approximate, but it's close enough for them. And that comes out to around, for a cheaper hay, your alfalfa stuff is usually around 50 pounds in a bale. Cheaper hay, usually grassy, is more like 40 pounds in a bale. So that comes out to not all that far off from here, within the same ballpark. Now, just hay alone works. Just pasture alone works basically almost every time for sheep. They don't need a lot. They don't need grain. Sheep generally need absolutely no grain whatsoever. On rare occasion, if you've got one that just lost a ton of weight giving birth or they went through a bad winter, maybe give them a little bit here and there. Go gentle and easy on it. Don't overdo it. You never feed sheep grain like I would poultry or pigs. They can't handle it. It can make them sick. It can kill them. As far as the behavior of sheep are quiet and timid. I would describe all of sheep as timid animals. They're timid. That's what they are. Think of somebody being called a sheep. Sheep are timid. They basically always run versus fight. They have the flight mentality hardwired into their brain. So they don't like to stay around during stress. Sheep were not built to handle stress. They were built to leave when stress comes. They're timid, they run from stress, they don't like to handle trouble. I would consider them a very calm animal. Overall, they're one of the more calm livestock. I mean, compared to my pigs, the sheep's not too far from my pig pen. The sheep are real calm compared to my pigs. The sheep aren't very noisy, and even when they are quite vocal, it's not as loud as my pigs. Not even close. Sheep are calm. They're scared easily as well. You can frighten or scare them, and they like to hide or run away and walk away if something's bothering them. So I actually gave them a little wall that I built in the back of their shelter just to hide behind. And when I go up to feed them, I don't feed them all that often, so they're not as used to me. They'll always go and hide behind their wall when I go out to feed them. And it makes them more comfortable if they have something to hide behind. Sheep, they're herd animals. They are calmed by the herd. If you don't have much of a herd, it's a little bit harder to keep them calm. But being herd animals, what does a herd do when something scary comes up? The herd starts moving. They flight. It's fight or flight. They flight. They do this whole thing where they just start to herd as a herd to move around, going to new areas or just to kind of stir around as a herd. And that's actually a big part of what calms them. When something bothers them, they come together as a herd, they stick close, and they move around. Walking seems to calm sheep. When they're nervous, they walk away. They walk around together, get behind something, they move around. It's how they calm themselves, and it's how they respond to obtrusive stimuli. They're also very clean animals. They don't really lay down and roll in the mud. They don't, for an animal that lives outside and eats off the ground and sleeps on the dirt, they're pretty darn clean animals. Now, one of my big points that I consider this more heavily than most when I'm looking at buying livestock, is what is their reproductive capabilities? I don't mean to sound too cold and harsh, as in I need to just have a ton of babies or I can't consider having animals, but there's a point to that because I need production. I need to feed my family without putting a lot of money into it. There's a point to it. So the production of sheep, it's actually a low production, right up there with cattle, right up there with goats. Cattle, goats, and sheep have low production. However, they're really durable, really hardy, and the fact that they can eat much lower grade feed than most animals, they can do fine off a feed that my rabbits would starve on. The hay that we're feeding our sheep right now, which is all grass hay, my rabbits would starve on that. They need more energy. The sheep are fine with it. So that's why they're so valuable to me. But as far as their productivity, it's usually not so great. Generally one ewe, that's one adult female, one female sheep, one ewe will produce 2 young every year. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Generally you get 2 young. So 1 litter of a full-grown adult will produce 2. Once in a while you can get triplets, but triplets is pretty rare. It doesn't normally happen. 1 out of 10 on a good year might have a triplet. Usually you get twins. Twins is common. If you have just 1, it usually means either you had a bad year or the sheep was just a bit young yet. Most people don't let them breed as yearlings. Usually a sheep will be able to breed around 10-ish months old when they go into their first estrus and they can be bred. Most producers wait for the 2nd year. The guy I bought our sheep from, who is a world-renowned breeder of Jacob sheep, he prefers a more hardy, natural, wild pasture breeding and lets them breed when they are ready and want to and around 10 months old. And he said that it's something like 75% chance of success. They don't always go into heat that early, but he said about 75% of the time they'll have their first lambing season the following spring, and they'll have 1 if they're bred early. And when it's about the same with pigs. If I breed my pigs early, they can handle it. They just have a smaller litter at the start, which it's not always that bad. So you're generally going to get 1 estrus a year. You can get 2. Not really a thing for most breeds. Some breeds, and on good years, they can have 2 estruses and be bred twice in a year. Usually you get 1 estrus a year, so for every adult female, you get 2 lambs in the spring, and then they're generally considered butcher size by end of summer or the fall. So roughly 6 months old or so, somewhere between 6 and 7 months usually, they're considered butcher size. And that's going to be approximately around 45 to 50 pounds of meat per animal, depending, sometimes more. It depends on how they were fed and how they were grown and the muscle of the breed. But they're not an overly productive animal. What they are is they're easygoing, super calm, super docile, and they can eat absolute low quality, basically crap level forage for most animals, and they're good with it. And they can reproduce well on it. Gestation in sheep is about 150 days on average, plus or minus. It is roughly 150 days, which is 5 months. And they're usually bred for their first time the fall after the year they're born. So they're about something like a year and a half plus old, something like that. Not quite 2 years old when they're bred the first time. Now, there's a little bit of special care on sheep. The first piece of special care I would mention is really about their feet. They have somewhat delicate hoofs compared to some of the other animals that I have, compared to my pigs especially. Sheep, basically, all you need to do is make sure that they have dry ground. If they're not living in a swamp, maybe a pig can handle that. Sheep can't. They need to have feet that stay dry most of the time. That'll eliminate most all the issues they have. If their feet can be dry, even if they do get little cracks in their hoofs or in between their toes, it's probably going to be fine. Make sure that their pens are kept clean and dry so you don't get what's called hoof rot, bacterial infection of the hoof, which is pretty serious. They can get ingrown hoofs. It's not all that common, where they just don't wear down fast enough and they grow. If that happens, you'll notice they're looking funky and they're walking funky. You can actually just take a wood rasp and shave that down yourself. It's not that hard. You might want a second person helping. The other big thing is shearing. Sheep need to be sheared usually once a year, usually end of spring before summer, before the warm months, because that helps prevent the other issue that they have, which is called fly strike. Not as big of an issue in our area, but as you get to a more hot or humid climate, we have cool humid here, still not big of an issue, but as you get into a hotter climate, you get this thing called fly strike. And basically, well, think of how sheep don't bathe, they never take a shower, they never scrub. They can get a little bit of a rash once in a while under their wool. It's not that common, but they can get it. And if you got a really big bad rash that starts to get raw, it can attract flies. And fly strike is when you get basically that condition and flies lay their eggs and the maggots hatch and they start eating the skin away around, eating the skin and the flesh around this rash area. And it's disgusting and it's putrid and it can be hard to see under all the wool until it's a problem. So you just gotta watch it, pay attention, and if you shear the wool short in the spring, it helps that not to happen because you get better airflow, you get rid of the old dirty wool, and you can see what's going on in the skin better. So that's really the major concerns. The other thing people always talk about is copper. Sheep are kind of, based on standard information, prone to copper toxicity. I don't really like to use that language because it's not really the case. The case with sheep, they don't handle way too much copper as well as other animals. Generally, your standard livestock mineral mix has way more copper than the animals actually need, and that's because the type of copper compound that they're using in the mineral blend is usually pretty darn poor on the absorption rate, so they have to put a ton of it in for it to absorb enough into the animals. Now, sheep absorb copper better than most animals. They can easily get into copper toxicity because of that, because they just get too much sucked into their body and it causes organ damage to them. Generally, you can use a standard livestock mineral blend on sheep. You just got to go with a little bit less copper. The tricky part is some people will get something that's blended for, say, goats. Goats, people flood them suckers with copper. They don't really need it. If they're healthy and they're on decent pasture and your soil's good, they're fine. But the type of copper that they're giving these animals, it doesn't absorb well, so they have to totally flood it in their feed, in their mineral supplements, to make sure that they get enough all the time. And if you do that same type of mentality. If you do a goat blend feed or a goat blended mineral for sheep, you can get way out of whack with that. You can get way too much copper and get copper toxicity. That's an issue. I am not currently giving any copper. I should probably start here in a little while, but right now we're doing well just with the hay that I'm feeding them, because I know that that hay was growing on a piece of dirt that has very good copper numbers. And I know that because I went and looked at the information, the printout the guy has on his last 17 years mineral tests. And he's got good copper because he always puts all of his manure on the fields, and that manure has all the minerals in it, and then you put it in the manure and put it on the field, and it gets in the field and comes out in the feed. Our feed's not really lacking very much of anything. It's doing pretty well. But as we change things around and getting into summer, change feeds a little, I'll probably end up getting more of a mineral mix for our sheep. And I'm not really going to concern about it too much. I'm probably just going to get either a standard livestock mineral and just do a little lower dose of it, or I'll just go and get one of the lesser copper mineral licks or something like that. It's not that big of a concern, but it's something worth understanding and realizing that you don't want to overdo the copper. Anyways, I'm glad you stopped by and watched this video. Don't forget to take the time and check out the website Northern Homesteading, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.